We're talking to Salvador Reza and Ryan Gabrielson. We seem to have lost the satellite connection at this moment. Ryan Gabrielson just won the George Polk Award for his 5-part series on Sheriff Arpaio. Salvador Reza, a longtime activist in Phoenix. He's a member of the Puente movement. Continue, Salvador.
Yes, well, Gianni Napolitano is actually, Sheriff Arpaio is the biggest black eye for Gianni Napolitano. Gianni Napolitano is a prosecutor, but the problem with this is that they have criminalized work now. To be here to seek work or to be here in the United States undocumented is actually just a civil penalty. Yes, yet, you know, they keep on stressing the criminality of it. The 287G agreements were brought in by Gianni Napolitano, and she was the one that actually went and interceded for Sheriff Arpaio and vouched for him to get the 287G agreements. Now she wants to expand the 287G agreement nationally, but if they do that, then the same thing that happened to Arizona is going to happen nationally, because you're going to have access to doing immigration work for a lot of like little county sheriffs that not necessarily understand the complexity of modern migrations. And on top of that, what is happening, Arizona has basically become like a ghost town, because no business comes here anymore because they're afraid that Sheriff Arpaio might come and raid them. A lot of companies have left Arizona to Mexico, to Canada, or to other states, basically because nobody's willing to risk it. Nobody's willing to come and invest in Arizona. And if this goes nationally, this is going to affect not only Arizona, but nationally it's going to affect the entire United States. And under the climate that economic climate we're in right now, we don't need that right now. I hope Obama actually looks at what happened to Arizona before they unleash the plans that Gianni Napolitano has for the entire country.
Well, and 287G actually is already to a certain extent nationwide. Florida and Alabama were two of the first places where these type of pacts were set up. But no one does it quite like Joe Arpaio. He's got the largest contingent of these officers in the country. It's 160. Nobody else has anywhere near that many. And what's sort of happening right now is there's dozens of other state and local police departments that are waiting, have applied to get 287G agreements to do this type of work on their own. And it is complicated work. It is difficult. It requires, they get 5 weeks of training, but sometimes that training doesn't necessarily either sink in or it doesn't actually work its way into the field. One of the things we found in our series with the sheriff is in their agreement with their contract with the federal government, there's very clear rules to protect against violating civil rights and to protect against any type of racial profiling. And one of them is that if you're going to go into a heavily, minority community, you have to, or any community, period, any type of large-scale operation, you have to have empirical evidence, data, police calls for service, some evidence that there's a crime problem there. And that has just blatantly been ignored by the Sheriff's Office, and they fully acknowledge that they've ignored that.
One of the things that we haven't been mentioning is that Sheriff Arpaio has been utilized by United for Southern America and other groups that are nativist groups that actually go and go, for example, to 4 or 5 businesses in an area, and then those 4 or 5 businesses ask Joe to come in, and while 70 or 80 of the other businesses in the area don't even want him because they know what's going to happen to them. So with that as a pretext, he comes in to so-called to defend the business community, and by going in there, he doesn't go in just with officers. He brings his whole SWAT team, like he said before, his headquarters, mobile operations. Sometimes he brings helicopters. Sometimes he brings horses, and he basically an intimidation type of tactics, and all under the pretext of protecting business. While we talk to the business community, say we don't even want him around here because they lose 60 to 70% of their sales whenever Sheriff Joe is in the area. So it's very negative to the community, and like you say, Napolitano is very aware of this, and at the same time, we believe that if they really do want to protect Homeland Security, they have to concentrate on the dangerous people, not on the guards and all of that. The other part can be done through immigration reform, which we hope that they actually do that.
The New York Times recently had an editorial talking about Napolitano reviewing the enforcement efforts, including looking at ways to expand 287G. Sheriff Arpaio, the New York Times says, is a powerful argument for doing just the opposite. Now that she's left Arizona politics behind, Ms. Napolitano is free to prove this is not Arpaio's America, where the mob rules and immigrants are subject to ritual humiliation. The country should expect no less. Ryan Gabrielson, do you think Napolitano will be able to rise to the task and challenge and change her own relationship with Arpaio?
Well, to a great extent, the relationship had already changed before she left. Last year, there was, it was mentioned, the unserved warrants. A lot of Arpaio's operations, immigration operations, or at least a share of them, were funded through state grants. I think it was last March or so, or last May, she actually took $600,000 that he had been set aside for him to do more of that enforcement and redirected it to create a new task force on to serve these warrants. That was seen as not really something about the warrants. That was about a rebuff to the sheriff and sort of a breaking of whatever ties were there. He's since then been blasting her constantly. I don't think there's a lot of love lost between the two anymore. The question is whether she's willing to undertake a politically challenging investigation that could result in the sheriff's office losing its partnership, its 287G agreement, and and whether there will be backlash over that, and whether she has to worry about that anymore now that she's in D.C. instead of Arizona.
No, I think that New York Times.
Go ahead.
And I think the New York Times is right on target, because, if you're here, and we've been filming a lot of those sweeps, and in which, we've seen little kids, 4 or 6 years old, being separated from the moms, where there's no need to separate them. The mom just did a minor traffic ticket, and because of that, they're separated. The kids are U.S. citizens, and on top of that, the way those little kids were treated, they were basically terrorized by masked sheriffs, which told me that I couldn't film even though there's no law against filming. And the thing is, it has become almost like a third world country here in Arizona. Maybe Sheriff Arpaio picked a lot of that while he was over there in Mexico under the DEA. But the thing is, he is actually creating Maricopa County like if it was almost like Honduras or some other country where civil rights and human rights are basically being destroyed, and actually the separation of the community is very stark and very marked, and to the point that his only friends are now his only friend left, and even his friend criticized him was the prosecutor Andrew Thomas. Now his best friends, which are the Board of Supervisors, he has them under investigation too. This is getting out of hand.
Well, I want to thank you both for being with us, joining us from Phoenix, where President Obama and the Homeland Security Secretary Janet Napolitano will be today sign legislation around bank foreclosures of homes. Salvador Reza, member of the Puente Movement in Phoenix, and Ryan Gabrielson, the George Polk Award-winning reporter with the East Valley Tribune, did a series on Sheriff Arpaio. This is Democracy Now!, and on this issue of home foreclosures, when we come back from break, we go to Minneapolis, where one poor people's organization is saying no more. They're going into houses that are not occupied, and they're occupying them. Stay with us.
Mothers and fathers are crying because their children are dying. Why don't y'all send them back home? This is where they belong. Why don't y'all send them back home? This is where they belong. This is a rich man's world. What is the poor man fighting for? This is a rich man's world. What is the poor man fighting for? Weapon of mass destruction ain't never been found.